Concerns of a looming war in the Arctic are expected to be addressed during this week's NATO Leaders Summit. There's a massive military build-up in the Arctic Circle, with the US, China and Russia all vowing for sway in the region. And a race for resources further increases the likelihood of armed conflict.
The frigid north is on a war footing. Recent NATO war games held in the Norwegian snow, the largest in 40 years, made that clear, as the West recognises an apparent rising Russian threat at the top of the world.
Russia has remilitarized the Arctic for 10, 12 years heavily, and NATO has done almost nothing, and only recently they woke up and now they are signaling to the other side, we will be ready also.
While Ukraine is the international community's present focus, the Arctic is likely to be the future frontier for great power competition. The US has increased Arctic patrols and this year allocated more than $175 million on new Arctic military projects. China has announced an Arctic strategy and built 2 icebreaker ships, while Russia is the most active, reopening Cold War-era Arctic bases, extending runways to accommodate nuclear bombers, and commissioning new icebreaker ships and submarines to strengthen its might in northern seas.
They have nothing to fear about. Even the Norwegian defense minister, they repeat that there is no immediate military fears.
There are fears a race for resources could lead to a boil-over. Thawing ice sheets are revealing new shipping lanes and an estimated $1 trillion worth of rare earth minerals. 30% of the world's untapped gas and 13% of its oil, for so long out of reach, may soon be accessible. And NATO's Arctic bastion, Norway, has already been attacked. Norwegian jets were scrambled at least 34 times last year, responding to possible Russian incursions. Russia is alleged to have carried out mock bombing runs, routinely jammed GPS signals in Norway, and to have hacked its parliament's computer systems.
Put together, these sound like acts of war.
Yeah, in a way you can say that. We can also see it as it's in a way demonstrating the spectrum of potential threats.
Russia claims Norway is the one being provocative, pointing to its hosting of regular NATO war games and allowing the US to operate bases on Norwegian soil.
Norway considered itself, last few years, it didn't exist, it didn't happen before, not as a sovereign individual country, but a far front of NATO.
This is where Norway and NATO ends and Russia begins, a 200-odd kilometre stretch patrolled by the Norwegian military and the Russian FSB. And there are calls for the military rhetoric on both sides to be toned down.
No, we don't think Norway should be as engaged in NATO as we are now. We don't have time for more war. We don't have time for more escalation. We need to go the other way, demilitarization, not more militarization.
Those calls are not being heeded. More NATO war games are scheduled here next year. The likely addition of Nordic nations Sweden and Finland into NATO will further inflame Russian tensions, and given Russia's treatment of bordering nations and the expected race for resources, it may prove difficult to lower the temperature in the Arctic Circle. Brent O'Halloran, Sky News on the Norway-Russia border.